Well, good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 284 of the Prancing Pony Podcast, where today, we're going to take a break from discussing the text and spend more of our time just reading it.
After all, it's Tolkien Reading Day, not Tolkien Discussion Day. Folks, pull up a bench in the common room and join us. I'm Marcel the Tolkienist, and I'm here with the man of the West who only recently learned how to read, Alan Sisto.
Thanks a lot, Marcel. Folks, it is hard to believe, but despite his claim, we are actually celebrating our 8th annual Tolkien Reading Day special today here on the Prancing Pony Podcast.
Folks, some of you are hearing this podcast for the very first time, and to you, we bid a very warm welcome. Here at the Prancing Pony Podcast, we are reading, talking, speculating, and often joking our way through Middle-earth a few pages at a time.
Usually. But every year on March 25th, the Tolkien Society organizes Tolkien Reading Day to encourage fans to celebrate and promote the life and works of J.R.R. Tolkien by reading favorite passages.
Why March 25th? Because that is the date of the downfall of Sauron and the destruction of Barad-dûr. Now, because this episode is coming out almost but not quite a week before that, you've still got a little time to figure out what your reading is going to be.
That's right, because every year the Tolkien Society chooses a different theme to focus on, and this year's theme is travel and adventure.
So we've selected some of our favorite passages from Tolkien's Legendarium, focusing on travel and adventure. Wait, did I say Legendarium? Who knows?
Maybe you did, maybe not.
Maybe we'll surprise you with a little something from one of Tolkien's other stories too.
I hope so. And in keeping with our Tolkien Reading Day tradition here at the Prancing Pony Podcast, we're going to spend our time today, reading and not talking quite as much.
And we do want to start the reading as soon as possible. So we are going to get right to it. Ellen, would you start us out?
I will, just after I provide a quick clarification, maybe correction, I hate using that word, to an answer that Matt and I gave back in episode 280. Now, that was the second part of the Siege of Gondor. Fantastic chapter. Great time running those 5 episodes with Matt. We were asked in the mailbag about who's taken up residence at Dol Goldur during the War of the Ring that would be leading an assault on Lothlorien. The question assumed, and we didn't question it, that the Nazgul were all involved either in the search for the ring or the war efforts, and thus we ended up concluding that maybe it was an ambitious orc leading the charge. But one of our listeners, thank you Matthew J., asked, are all 9 of the Nazgul mentioned together at Minas Tirith? In other words, the question has the implication, could one of them have been involved? So I wanted to take a look at the timeline. So on March 10th, we know Pippin was looking down from the citadel and we read, but now wheeling swiftly across it, like shadows of untimely night, he saw in the middle airs below him 5 bird-like forms, horrible as carrion fowl, yet greater than eagles, cruel as death. Now they swooped near, venturing almost within bowshot of the walls. Now they circled away. Now, 4 days later, on March 14th, that's the day that Minas Tirith is fully besieged, we know that one is actually over the pass of Cirith Ungol, because when Frodo and Sam make their escape and break the will of the Watchers, the bell clangs, and then we read, from the Watchers there went up a high and dreadful wail. Far up above in the darkness it was answered. Out of the black sky there came dropping like a bolt, a winged shape, rending the clouds with a ghastly shriek. And then finally, on March 25th, when Aragorn and the host are at the Black Gates, we read, and as they stood, they saw all the Nazgul gathered together, hovering above the towers of the teeth like vultures, and they knew that they were watched. Now, of course, that would have been just 8, because by that point, the Witch King was gone. So that is all we know of the whereabouts of the Nazgul, but if we compare those dates and numbers with the battles in other locations, we get the assaults on Lorien that took place on March 11th, March 15th, and March 22nd. And then Dol Goldur also assaulted Thranduil's realm on the 15th in the battle under the trees. Given those dates, it's entirely within the realm of possibility. And frankly, I have to say, this is why it's a correction. I'd even say it was likely, given those numbers, that at least 3 of the Nazgul, most likely Khamûl, who'd been in charge of Dol Goldur previously, and 2 others, were in fact based at Dol Goldur and responsible for at least the first 2 assaults on Lorien and northern Mirkwood. Those are the ones on the 11th and the 15th. I expect that after the death of the Witch King on March 15th, Sauron would have sent the remaining Nazgul, demoralized after the destruction of their leader, to go and get Khamûl and his team and bring them back. And that's why all the remaining 8 were at the Black Gate by the 25th. So I don't know about that final assault on Lorien on the 22nd. That feels awfully tight in terms of timing. Sauron would have known about Aragorn's host entering the Morgul Vale on the 19th, So I doubt that attack on the 22nd would have had a Nazgul behind it, but that's my guess. Marcel, I know you weren't with me when Matt and I discussed this, but do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, I actually tried to have a listen into that particular episode, and okay. I really loved the idea that there might be like an ambitious orc, which is like one of the coolest hashtags you could possibly use.
Hashtag ambitious orc,
for all of those cosplayers out there who do Uruk-hai and all of whatever, that's the thing to do.
I'm looking for a promotion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely.
If the the position opens out, Dol Goldur chieftain, that is the thing to go for.
No doubt.
But somehow I felt, realizing that Sauron used Dol Guldur as his first place, as his first, sort of fortress, and then had the Nazgul prepare stuff in Mordor itself and Barad-dûr, etc. I thought, before Sauron came to Dol Guldur, someone else must have prepared it.
Yeah.
And that he would only give an ad to someone really at the top of the food chain.
Exactly. Somebody he really trusted.
Absolutely. And I think that should have been a Nazgul, even though I still support the hashtag ambitious orc.
Ambitious orc. I know. I think we're going to have to use that one, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was probably Kamul, almost certainly makes sense. The mystery still surrounds the attack on the 22nd, because I do think that's probably too late in the timeline for him to have still been there. I think by then they were watching Aragorn and the host marching up from the Morgul Vale. So I don't know. We don't know. But I think it's safe to say the first two probably had a Nazgul behind it. So now we're going to go ahead and get into the readings. Thank you, Marcel, for your input on that. And I get to start with a very, very short one, but it's one that I think you'll understand why we had to include this if we're doing travel and adventure. This is from The Lord of the Rings, Book 1, Chapter 1, A Long Expected Party. It was a fine night, and the black sky was dotted with stars. Bilbo looked up, sniffing the air. What fun! What fun to be off again, off on the road with dwarves. This is what I've really been longing for years. Goodbye, he said, looking at his old home and bowing to the door. Goodbye, Gandalf. Goodbye for the present, Bilbo. Take care of yourself. You are old enough, and perhaps wise enough. Take care. I don't care. Don't you worry about me. I'm as happy now as I've ever been. And that is saying a great deal. But the time has come. I'm being swept off my feet at last, he added. And then, in a low voice, as if to himself, he sang softly in the dark. The road goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began. Now far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow if I can. Pursuing it with eager feet until it joins some larger way where many paths and errands meet, and whither then I cannot say. He paused, silent for a moment. Then, without another word, he turned away from the lights and voices in the field and tents, and followed by his three companions, went round into his garden and trotted down the long sloping path. He jumped over a low place in the hedge at the bottom and took to the meadows, passing into the night like a rustle of wind in the grass. Gandalf remained for a while, staring after him into the darkness. Goodbye, my dear Bilbo, until our next meeting, he said softly, and went back indoors.
Alan, when you invited me to Tolkien Reading Day, I never thought there would be singing included. So well done, well done.
Thank you, sir. You'll make sure that you sing in the three passages I've given you, right? You've got the long ones.
Yeah, okay.
I have you singing the entire lay of Beren and Luthien. I hope you've written the music for that.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, folks, we had to start with this one. It may be short, but it is absolutely iconic. And it brings us right to the beginning of the grand adventure of the Lord of the Rings. So for just this first reading, you can actually expect our discussion to probably last a little bit longer than the reading itself, but don't get used to that.
It is Tolkien Reading Day, and we're trying to keep to this theme. Mm-hmm. So the thing about this is, as we often learn in Tolkien, there's just a lot more than a couple of lines. We actually get first a version of this Song of the Hobbit, spoken, not sung, by Bilbo, and he observes then that roads go ever on and on, not the road, carefully, it's plural, roads.
That's right. That's right. And the last few lines of that are telling, because he's singing this, or speaking this, I should say, on his way back from the adventure. Yet feet that wandering have gone, turn at last to home afar. Eyes that fire and sword have seen, and horror in the halls of stone, look at last on meadows green, and trees and hills they long have known.
That's a change in atmosphere, a change in expectations and life experience that might have been spontaneous or otherwise, but it brought Gandalf to point out that something was the matter.
I love that. There's something the matter with you.
And
different,
that he wasn't,
maybe. I don't know. The matter.
You're not the same hobbit, that you've been before.
Exactly.
Of course.
Yeah. Of course.
Consider what he had seen and experienced on that journey, and let's face it, the comfort he must have felt at arriving back home to familiar lands.
Yeah, and that's another one of those persistent themes that we see throughout is the comfort of home, and it's just a fantastic thing. The Shire is a wonderful place. Whenever we're looking through the Hobbit's perspective. So in that version, Bilbo was looking back on the roads, plural. Whereas in the one that I just read, or sang, I suppose, he's looking forward on the road. And those are two pretty significant differences. Interestingly, in a little bit, Frodo will speak the exact same verse as this one, but with one single word change, but it's significant. Instead of pursuing the road with eager feet, he's now pursuing it with feet that are already weary. And this is really early in his journeys at Kirkhollow.
Yeah, it's, this final version of this walking song is spoken by Bilbo in Rivendell.
Yes.
After the destruction of the ring. So Bilbo is slightly older and more of a gentleman, and he's ready for his last travel and adventure, the topic of this year's Tolkien Reading Day.
That's right.
And he says, "The road goes ever on and on, out from the door where it began. Now far ahead the road has gone. Let others follow it who can. Let them a journey new begin, but I, at last, with weary feet, will turn towards the lighted inn, my evening rest and sleep to meet."
Oh, man, that is just a clear indication, as clear as can be, that his journeying is done. The road is still going, right? It still exists. It's still out there. There are adventures to be had, but it's for others to follow now. Bilbo's, I love this. I'm going to the inn for some rest and some sleep. I'm done. And indeed, really, that is what Bilbo is doing. He's going to go visit the Inn of the Undying Lands.
Which is one of the coolest inns to talk about, right? Let's face it. Right?
Yeah, seriously, if you're going to get there, the wait list is really long. Yes, excuse me, Maître D, I would like a table at the Inn of the Undying Lands. I'm sorry, you're not on the list.
I'm now questioning myself, who could possibly be the bouncer at the inn?
Oh,
if you're in a local English pub.
It's Tulkas. It's absolutely Tulkas. He's a Tulkas smash. He's happy with that.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, folks, we have a lot more reading and a little less discussion for you right after the break. Now, before we get back to more travel and adventure, we want to make sure you know that even after you've listened to this episode, there is a lot more talk going on at the Prancing Pony Podcast.
The PPP has an amazing listener community. They're always coming up with great questions and discussions across all our social media spaces. Check out our common room on Facebook, our dedicated subreddit, Twitter, and more.
Yeah, on Facebook, just look for the Prancing Pony Podcast. Now, please follow the page so that you get the announcements, the news, and the episodes, but be sure to join the group for some great discussions.
Or, if you prefer Reddit, find us there at r/PrancingPonyPod, or on Twitter and Instagram, we're simply at Prancing Pony Pod.
And the PPP is also on TikTok now, at Prancing Pony Pod. Now that I have you on the show, Marcel, I wanted to find out if you knew about the latest project that Sean and I are working on.
Let me guess. You're going to be rescuing the script for season 2 of The Rings of Power.
That is beyond my skill to heal. It needs elvish medicine. No. Sean and I are heading to Rivendell to write a book, except for the Rivendell part. The book is called Why We Love Middle-earth, and we're going to be releasing that in September, just in time for Hobbit Day and the start of season 8 of the Prancing Pony Podcast, and we are both really excited and tired.
Well, I'm really excited for the book too, because it's you two guys doing it. And what are we going to get to read in it?
Well, with last year's release of the Amazon show and the other ways that the Tolkien fandom is growing, we believe that a brand new group of viewers is going to be looking to learn more about the rich world of Middle-earth fandom. And Why We Love Middle-earth is going to be a guidebook, at least that's our intention, for those diving into Middle-earth for the first time, as well as for Legendarium veterans looking for more information on like a specific aspect of Tolkien's works or on the fandom. Now, the book is going to be a collection of short chapters. Each is going to serve as an introduction either to one of Tolkien's books or to a different topic of study or to fan interests. We're going to have chapters on all sorts of things. And the idea is to draw readers deeper into Middle-earth as they read along with us.
Luckily for me, you've let me preview the first chapter and I've seen the table of contents. So it really looks like an absolutely great read. You'll be talking about the Legendarium, of course. We've mentioned this before, of course, but also about adaptations, art, games, online communities, fan gatherings, and languages. And to me, the most important thing, the last word on the table of content is brewing.
Well, Sean's a brewer as well, so of course he's going to mention that. Yeah. It is going to be great. We're going to mirror the experience of the podcast as much as possible as we talk about all of these things. We're going to have asides and digressions. We'll have commentary in each of our two voices, and of course, plenty of pop culture references and terrible dad jokes. Now, pre-orders are available now, so check out our socials and our website for more info. For now, though, please let's go ahead and get back to our readings. Marcel, you've got the Great Elven Road Trip.
Yes, and that's a part from the Silmarillion of Chapter 3 of the Coming of the Elves and the Captivity of Melkor. But the elves were at first unwilling to hearken to the summons, for they had as yet seen the Valar only in their wrath as they went to war, save Orome alone, and they were filled with dread. Therefore, Orome was sent again to them, and he chose from among them ambassadors who should go to Valinor and speak for their people, and these were Ingwe, Finwe, and Elwe, who afterwards were kings. And coming, they were filled with awe by the glory and majesty of the Valar, and desired greatly the light and splendor of the trees. Then Orome brought them back to Cuivienen, and they spoke before their people, and counselled them to heed the summons of the Valar and remove into the west. Then befell the first chundering of the elves, for the kindred of Ingwe and the most part of the kindreds of Finwe and Elve were swayed by the words of their lords, and were willing to depart and follow Orome. And these were known ever after as the Eldar, by the name that Orome gave to the elves in the beginning in their own tongue. But many refused the summons, preferring the starlight and the white spaces of Middle-earth to the rumour of the trees. And these are the Avari, the unwilling, and they were sundered in their time from the Eldar, and met never again until many ages were past. The Eldar prepared now a great march from their first homes in the east, and they were arrayed in 3 hosts. The smallest host, and the first to set forth, was led by Ingwe, the most high lord of all the elvish race. He entered into Valinor and sits at the feet of the powers, and all elves revere his name. But he came never back, nor looked again upon Middle-earth. The Vanyar were his people. They are the fair elves, the beloved of Manwe and Varda, and few among men have spoken with them. Next came the Noldor, a name of wisdom, the people of Finwe. They are the deep elves, the friends of Aule, and they are renowned in song, for they fought and laboured long and grievously in the northern lands of old. The greatest host came last, and they are named the Teleri, for they tarried on the road and were not wholly of a mind to pass from the dusk to the light of Valinor. In water they had great delight, and those that came at last to the western shores were enamoured of the sea. The sea elves, therefore, they became, in the land of Aman, the Falmari, for they made music beside the breaking waves. 2 lords they had, for their numbers were great, Elwe Singollo, which signifies grey mantle, and Olwe his brother. These were the 3 kindreds of the Eldalie, who passing at length into the uttermost west in the days of the trees are called the Kalakwendi, elves of the light. But others of the Eldar there were who set out indeed upon the westward march, but became lost upon the long road, or turned aside, or lingered on the shores of Middle-earth, and these were for the most part of the kindred of the Teleri, as is told hereafter. They dwelt by the sea, or wandered in the woods and mountains of the world, yet their hearts were turned towards the west. Those elves the Kalakwendi call the Umanyar, since they came never to the land of Aman and the Blessed Realm, but the Umanyar and the Avari alike they call the Morikwendi, elves of the darkness, for they never beheld the light that was before the sun and moon. It is told that when the hosts of the Eldari departed from Cuivienen, Orome rode at the head upon Nahar, his white horse shod with gold, and passing northward about the Sea of Helkar, they turned towards the west. Before them great clouds hung still black in the north about the ruins of war, and the stars in that region were hidden. Then not a few grew afraid and repented and turned back and are forgotten. Long and slow was the march of the Eldar into the west, for the leagues of Middle-earth were uncounted and weary and pathless. Nor did the Eldar desire to hasten, for they were filled with wonder at all that they saw, and by many lands and rivers they wished to abide. And though all were yet willing to wander, many feared rather their journey's end than hope for it. Therefore, whenever Orome departed, having at times other matters to heed, they halted and went forward no more, until he returned to guide them. And it came to pass after many years of journeying in this manner, that the Eldar took their course through a forest, and they came to a great river, wider than any they had yet seen, and beyond it were mountains whose sharp horns seemed to pierce the realm of the stars. This river, it is said, was even the river which was after called Anduin, the Great, and was ever the frontier of the westlands of Middle-earth. But the mountains were the Theiglir, the towers of mist, upon the borders of Eriador, yet they were taller and more terrible in those days, and were reared by Melkor to hinder the riding of Orome. Now the Teleri abode long on the east bank of that river, and wished to remain there, but the Vanya and the Noldor passed over it, and Orome led them into the passes of the mountains. And when Orome was gone forward, the Teleri looked upon the shadowy heights, and were afraid. Then one arose in the host of Olwe, which was ever the hindmost on the road. Lenve he was called. He forsook the westward march, and led away a numerous people southwards down the great river, and they passed out of the knowledge of their kin until long years were past. Those were the Nandor, and they became a people apart and like their kin, save that they loved water, and dwelt most beside falls and running streams. Greater knowledge they had of living things, tree and herb, bird and beast, than all other elves. And after years Denethor, son of Lenve, turned again west at last, and led a part of the people over the mountains into Beleriand at the rising of the moon.
Wow, thank you, Marcel. That was a fantastic reading, and what a great passage for travel and adventure. First, we've answered a very important question. I wondered how you would pronounce herb. There is an ongoing battle between herb and herb. And, of course, I'm an American, so I pronounce it herb, because herb is somebody's name. If you're Herbert and you're called herb for short, then you're herb. That's distinct from the plants that have fragrances and flavors. Those are herbs. Anyway, I know I'm going to catch all sorts of emails about that, but that was a fantastic reading. And I was just transported to those moments.
Right now, I'm asking myself, what is doing Herb when he's a herb specialist? I mean,
oh man,
Herb with the herbs. I mean, like Herb with the herbs.
Herbs with Herb.
That's a great name for a company, right?
That's a great name for a podcast too.
Ooh, yes. Let's talk about that later.
My name is Herb, and I am an herb specialist. I'm going to be talking about herbs today. New spinoff of the PPP, Herbs with Herb, because, of course, it has some alliterative qualities. All right. So back to the reading itself, just some fantastic stuff. I love the reminders of things that sometimes we forget about, that the whole reason the Misty Mountains exist is because Melkor was trying to stop Orome's riding. And
Orome's like, okay, yeah, that's nice. Put them
nice
like
speed bump.
It's not a problem for me because I have Nahar, and
Nahar pretty much doesn't care. Yeah.
So yeah, I really like the things that Melkor tries to do, and then someone, like in real life, you come up with a rule and regulation, and then someone finds the loophole in that particular rule and regulation, and that's like everyone else and Melkor.
And Melkor, it really is. Yeah, just a wonderful passage. I mean, really, that is the first bit of travel, to go from Lake Cuivién and all the way to Valinor. What a road trip that is.
And it's a good topic. I mean, the Tolkien Society is always suggesting a topic for every Tolkien Reading Day.
Every year's been interesting. We've done 8 of these now, and they're all great.
Absolutely. And they always come up with different ones. I mean, they don't repeat themselves, which I really like. And Travel Adventure, but when I first read Travel Adventure, I was really excited because I thought, okay, the Journeys of Frodo, there's a book of, Barbara Strucky did that. But at the end of the day, if you look at, for example, Instagram and you go for a travel and adventure, it's all these good-looking ladies and gentlemen in front of beaches and having cocktails, and it's really nice for them, and I'm really happy for them. Yeah, but that's not really what Middle Earth does with travel and adventure, because often you come into danger, and when the word is afraid, that we're afraid of crossing the mountains. So
that's a very, very good point. Middle Earth, you're rarely traveling for vacation.
I know. Middle Earth tourism is a big thing by now. True.
Yeah. But at the time, most travel in Middle Earth was from danger into bigger danger. Yeah. That's a very good point.
I mean, we've got inns that are lost, and forgotten and, far away from Bree. And there really isn't anyone anywhere, It's a ruin. So
fascinating selection on the reading there. Folks, just so you're aware, we actually picked our readings separately. Yeah, that's the way we've always done it. It's the way I did it with Sean for the previous 7 Tolkien Reading Day specials, where we would each come up with the passages that we thought, really highlighted the theme. So it was very interesting to see that was the first one that Marcel picked. Now, for the next reading, I'm going to go back to The Lord of the Rings, and I'm hoping that we have a little something special from Jordan here. This is from The Lord of the Rings, Book 1, Chapter 4, A Shortcut to Mushrooms. When they had finished, the farmer and his sons went out with a lantern and got the wagon ready. It was dark in the yard when the guests came out. They threw their packs on board and climbed in. The farmer sat in the driving seat and whipped up his 2 stout ponies. His wife stood in the light of the open door. "You be careful of yourself, Maggot," she called. "Don't go arguing with any foreigners and come straight back." "I will," said he, and drove out of the gate. There was now no breath of wind stirring. The night was still and quiet, and a chill was in the air. They went without lights and took it slowly. After a mile or 2, the lane came to an end, crossing a deep dike and climbing a short slope up onto the high-banked causeway. Maggot got down and took a good look either way, north and south, but nothing could be seen in the darkness, and there was not a sound in the still air. Thin strands of river mist were hanging above the dikes and crawling over the fields. "It's going to be thick," said Maggot, "but I'll not light my lanterns till I turn for home. We'll hear anything on the road long before we meet it tonight." It was 5 miles or more from Maggot's Lane to the ferry. The hobbits wrapped themselves up, but their ears were strained for any sound above the creak of the wheels and the slow clop of the ponies' hoofs. The wagon seemed slower than a snail to Frodo. Beside him, Pippin was nodding towards sleep, but Sam was staring forwards into the rising fog. They reached the entrance to the ferry lane at last. It was marked by 2 tall white posts that suddenly loomed up on their right. Farmer Maggot drew in his ponies, and the wagon creaked to a halt. They were just beginning to scramble out, when suddenly they heard what they had all been dreading, hoofs on the road ahead. The sound was coming towards them. Maggot jumped down and stood holding the ponies' heads and peering forward into the gloom. Clip-clop, clip-clop came the approaching rider. The fall of the hoofs sounded loud in the still, foggy air. "You'd better be hidden, Mr. Frodo," said Sam anxiously. "You get down in the wagon and cover up with blankets, and we'll send this rider to the rightabouts." He climbed out and went to the farmer's side. Black riders would have to ride over him to get near the wagon. Clop, 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 clop. The rider was nearly on them. "Hello there," called Farmer Maggot. The advancing hoofs stopped short. They thought they could dimly guess a dark, cloaked shape in the mist, a yard or 2 ahead. "Now then," said the farmer, throwing the reins to Sam and striding forward, "don't you come a step nearer. What do you want and where are you going?" "I want Mr. Baggins. Have you seen him?" said a muffled voice. But the voice was the voice of Mary Brandybuck. A dark lantern was uncovered, and its light fell on the astonished face of the farmer. "Mr. Mary!" he cried. "Yes, of course. Who did you think it was?" said Mary, coming forward. As he came out of the mist and their fears subsided, he seemed suddenly to diminish to ordinary hobbit size. He was riding a pony, and a scarf was swathed round his neck and over his chin to keep out the fog. Frodo sprang out of the wagon to greet him. "So there you are at last," said Merry. "I was beginning to wonder if you would turn up at all today, and I was just going back to supper. When it grew foggy, I came across and rode up towards Stock to see if you'd fallen in any ditches. But I'm blessed if I know which way you've come. Where did you find them, Mr. Maggot? In your duck pond?" "No, I caught 'em trespassing," said the farmer. "Nearly set my dogs on 'em, but they'll tell you all the story, I've no doubt. Now, if you'll excuse me, Mr. Merry and Mr. Frodo and all, I'd best be turning for home. Mrs. Maggot'll be worried in with the night getting thick." He backed the wagon into the lane and turned it. "Well, good night to you all," he said. "It's been a queer day and no mistake, but all's well as ends well. Or perhaps we should not say that until we reach our own doors. I'll not deny that I'll be glad now when I do." He lit his lanterns and got up. Suddenly, he produced a large basket from under the seat. "I was nearly forgetting," he said. "Mrs. Maggot put this up for Mr. Baggins with her compliments." He handed it down and moved off, followed by a chorus of thanks and good nights. They watched the pale rings of light round his lanterns as they dwindled into the foggy night. Suddenly, Frodo laughed. From a covered basket he held, the scent of mushrooms was rising.
And that certainly is another hashtag. You had me at mushrooms.
Yeah.
that
I'm
is.
going to do hashtag no mushrooms. I'm not a big mushrooms fan. I don't know. Fungus is just not on my list of foods to eat. But no, I understand. I know people love it. But anyway, yeah, we had that conversation back when we got to that point in the books. I'm sure, Sean and I went back and forth. I love that passage for travel and adventure because it has all of that in there. It has the peril and the danger and the fear. And then it has the relief and the excitement and the joy. And it's got a little bit of humor, and it's just got everything in that short little bit.
Absolutely. It's absolutely special because, Tolkien in the beginning of The Lord of the Rings has these last homely houses across the whole sort of story that they're going through and the travels that they have. You come to Farmer Maggot's house, you come to Goldberry, and to Tom Bombadil, you come to Bray and the Prancing Pony. Haha, a little note of the Prancing Pony podcast here. And then you come to Rivendell. It's like these breaks between the danger and moments when you can really feel at home. And that is one of the things that I love so much about Tolkien, that you can really, even if it's dangerous, there is hope that you can have, sit beside the chimney and have some proper food, and most hopefully, mushrooms.
I would have been happier if it was like a whole basket full of bacon, but
Well, it's preferences. It's preference,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
Mrs. Maggot does the choice here, so we're good with mushrooms.
I think we're going to have to be all right. You know what? If I were a hobbit, I'm sure I would like mushrooms. So there you have it. And folks, what you heard there in the background, the music and the ambiance and the effects, that is all part of my editor, Jordan Rennell's long expected soundscape. That's the project that he's been working on that I've been very happy to support. It is a fantastic set of audio files that will get you through reading the entirety of The Lord of the Rings at different reading paces and the whole 9 yards. Have you heard any of that, by the way, Marcel? I'm just curious. Not for the recording. Just
Jordan contacted me when it was, the sort of Kickstarter thing at the time, the crowdfunding, and I listened to some of it, and it sounds absolutely fantastic.
It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to getting time off and really listening to it because it is a soundscape. You should really sit down,
put on quality headphones and sit down and enjoy and have a drink and read for like an hour or two. Yeah, I can't wait.
Sounds fantastic. Definitely,
it really does. All right. Well, continuing with the theme of Tolkien Reading Day, not Tolkien Discussion Day, you've got another fantastic reading. I'm doing all the light stuff, right? All the fun, hobbity things, and you're like, the grand tales of the First Age.
I can see a pattern here.
Yes, yeah. So why don't you take these next travels of one of my favorite First Age people?
I'm going to talk about Tuor's Travels, which is in two parts. The one is from the Silmarillion, chapter 23 of Tuor and the Fall of Gondolin. The second part will be on Unfinished Tales, part 1, chapter 1 of Tuor and his coming in Gondolin. And I'm going to start out with the Silmarillion. But when Tuor had lived thus in solitude as an outlaw for 4 years, Ulmo set it in his heart to depart from the land of his fathers, for he had chosen Tuor as the instrument of his designs. And leaving once more the caves of Androth, he went westwards across Dol Lomin, and found Anon in Gelith, the gate of the Noldor, which the people of Turgon built when they dwelt in Everest long years before. Thence, A dark tunnel led beneath the mountains and issued into Cirith Niniach, the Rainbow Cleft, through which turbulent water ran towards the Western Sea. Thus it was that Tuor's flight from Hithlum was marked by neither man nor orc, and no knowledge of it came to the ears of Morgoth. And Tuor came into Netherust, and looking upon Beligair, the great sea, he was enamoured of it, and the sound of it, and the longing for it were ever in his heart and ear, and an unquiet was on him that took him at last into the depths of the realms of Ulmo. Then he dwelt in Netherust alone, and the summer of that year passed, and the doom of Nargothrond drew near. But when the autumn came, he saw 7 great swans flying south, and he knew them for a sign that he had tarried overlong, and he followed their flight along the shores of the sea. Thus he came at length to the deserted halls of Vinyamar beneath Mount Tarast, and he entered in. Here I'll stop and read from the vision from the story in Unfinished Tales. Then Tuor, marvelling, saw that in the wall behind the throne there hung a shield and a great hauberk and a helm and a long sword in his sheath. The hauberk shone as it were wrought of silver untarnished, and the sunbeam gilded it with sparks of gold. But the shield was of a shape strange to Tuor's eyes, where it was long and tapering, and its field was blue, in the midst of which was wrought an emblem of a white swan's wing. Then Tuor spoke, and his voice rang as a challenge in the roof. "By this token I will take these arms unto myself, and upon myself whatsoever doom they bear." And the taking of those arms, a change came upon Tuor, son of Huor, and his heart grew great within him. Back to the Silmarillion. There came a great storm out of the west, and out of that storm Ulmo, the Lord of Waters, arose in majesty, and spoke to Tuor as he stood beside the sea. And Ulmo bade him depart from that place, and seek out the hidden kingdom of Gondolin, and he gave Tuor a great cloak, to mantle him in shadow from the eyes of his enemies. But in the morning, when the storm was past, Tuor came upon an elf standing beside the walls of Vinyamar, and he was Voranwe, son of Aranwe of Gondolin, who sailed in the last ship that Turgon sent into the west. But when that ship returning at last out of the deep ocean foundered, and the great storm within sight of the coast of Middle-earth, Ulmo took him up, alone of all its mariners, and cast him unto the land near Vinyamar, and learning of the command laid upon Tuor by the Lord of Waters, Voranwe was filled with wonder, and did not refuse him his guidance to the hidden door of Gondolin. Therefore they set out together from their place, and as the fell winter of that year came down upon them out of the north, they went warily eastward under the eaves of the mountains of shadow. At length they came in their journeying to the pools of Ivrin, and looked with grief on the defilement wrought there by the passage of Glaurung the dragon. But even as they gazed upon it, and now I switch to the Unfinished Tales vision, they heard a cry in the woods, and they stood still, as grey stones, listening. But the voice was a fair voice, though filled with grief, and it seemed that it called ever upon a name, as one that searches for another who is lost. And as they waited, one came through the trees, and they saw that he was a tall man, armed, clad in black, with a long sword drawn. And they wondered, for the blade of the sword also was black, but the edges shone bright and cold. Woe was graven in his face, and when we beheld the ruin of Ivrin, he cried aloud in grief, saying, "Ivrin, fail Ivrin, Gwyndor and Beleg, here once I was hailed, but now never shall I drink the draught of peace again." Then he went swiftly away towards the north, as one in pursuit, or on an errand of great haste, and they heard him cry, "Fail Ivrin, Finduilas," until his voice died away in the woods. But they knew not that Nargothrond had fallen, and this was Turin, son of Hurin, the Black Sword. Thus only for a moment, and never again, did the paths of those kinsmen, Turin and Tuor, draw together. Back to the Silmarillion. And at the last, by the power that Ulmo set upon them, they came to the hidden door of Gondolin, and passing down the tunnel, they reached the inner gate, and were taken by the guard as prisoners. From Unfinished Tales. Tuor saw that they stood at the end of a ravine, the like of which he had never before beheld or imagined in his thought, long though he had walked in the wild mountains of the north. For beside the Orfarch Echor, Ceredniniach was but a groove in the rock. Here the hands of the Lalav themselves, in ancient wars of the world's beginning, had wrested the great mountains asunder, and the sides of the rift were sheer as if axe cloven, and they towered up to heights unguessable. There, far aloft, ran a ribbon of sky, and against it, deep blue, stood black peaks and jagged pinnacles, remote but hard, cruel as spears. Too high were those mighty walls for the winter sun to overlook, and though it was now full morning, faint stars glimmered above the mountain tops, and down below all was dim, but for the pale light of lamps set beside the climbing road. Back to the Silmarillion. Then they were led up the mighty ravine of Orfalch Echor, barred by 7 gates, and brought before Ecthelion of the Fountain, the warden of the great gate at the end of the climbing road, and there Tuor cast aside his cloak, and from the arms that he bore from Vinyamar it was seen that he was in truth one sent by Ulmo. Then Tuor looked down upon the fair vale of Tumladen, set as a green jewel amid the encircling hills, and he saw far off upon the rocky height of Amangwareth Gondolin, the great city of 7 names, whose fame and glory is mightiest in song of all dwellings of the elves in the hitherlands. At the bidding of Ecthelion, trumpets were blown on the towers of the great gate, and they echoed on the hills, and far off but clear there came a sound of answering trumpets blown upon the white walls of the city, flushed with the rose of dawn upon the plain. Thus it was that the son of Huor rode across Tumladen, and came to the gate of Gondolin, and passing up the white stairways of the city, he was brought at last to the tower of the king, and looked upon the images of the trees of Valinor. Then Tuor stood before Turgon, son of Fingolfin, high king of the Noldor, and upon the king's right hand there stood Maeglin, his sister son, but upon his left hand sat Idril, Celebrindal, his daughter. And all that heard the voice of Tuor marvelled, doubting that this were in truth a man of mortal race, for his words were the words of the Lord of Waters that came to him in that hour. And he gave warning to Turgon that the curse of Mundos now hastened to its fulfilment, when all the works of the Noldor should perish, and he bade him depart, and abandon the fair and mighty city that he had built, and go down to Sirion to the sea. Then Turgon pondered long the counsel of Ulmo, and there came into his mind the words that were spoken to him in Vinyamar. Love not to wear the work of thy hands, and the devices of thy heart, and remember that the true hope of the Noldor lieth in the west, and cometh from the sea.
Oh, man, I've got chills. I've got chills. That is, first of all, a fantastic reading. I just beautifully done. And, of course, also beautifully selected. That is such a journey, such a travel, for Tuor, and I wish we could have read the whole thing, right? I mean, all of Tuor's journeys, take the full Unfinished Tales version of it from all of those journeys.
The 7 gates, just the 7 gates part.
The 7 gates alone.
It's so amazing. I love this so much. Yep.
That is such a beautiful set of passages. But yeah, I mean, it would have been a 50-minute reading at least to read the whole thing. Not that anybody would have complained, except for maybe Jordan, and that would be fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is just such a fantastic passage or set of passages.
When it comes to world building in Tolkien, when people talk about, how he pulls the threads together into that tapestry of story, and you come to this moment when he says, thus only for a moment and never again, the paths of those kinsmen to and through. I mean, I'm really close to crying all the time because that is so sweet and so sad. And those two, what could they have done together, right? What could they have achieved? But only once and never again, Wow.
So poignant. And it's just, because of course that brings into Turin's story, and you just start thinking of down those lines and how all of this is woven together, and this journey, even more on Varanwe, on his journey.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, this is all Tuor, but Varanwe had a heck of a journey too.
Alone of all of its mariners. There's a
Yeah.
ship, there's a bunch of people, and one survives.
Yeah.
That is tough. That is really
And
tough.
then he comes back and he has to do a job that he really doesn't want to have to do, which is to lead this guy back to Gondolin because he feels like that's dangerous. I might, I could give up my life in doing this. Obviously, he's convinced that he's from Ulmo, so he'll do it. But my goodness, that, yeah. Folks, if you have never read the version of Tuor that is in the Unfinished Tales, please do. It is absolutely breathtaking. There's so much more there. Sean and I covered it, and I can't recall exactly when, but it would have been relatively, well, it would have been season 1. It probably would have been about the middle of season 1, I want to say, somewhere in the 20s, I think, was where we covered that. And we did end up reading some fairly lengthy passages from, that journey through the Seven Gates, as well as all of the adventures of Varanwe and Tuor, which could make for an interesting miniseries.
No, please.
Yeah.
We could possibly mention, that we can have possible miniseries in the future. You never know.
You never know.
A number of people would rather have something with Tom Bombadil, which is fair enough. I get that. Yeah. I mean, Bombadil going boating, that is fantastic. But
that is fantastic.
Yeah, but I mean, Tuor and Unfinished Tales, if people ask me, what's your favorite Tolkien book? Sometimes the answer is Unfinished Tales. Because it's like the beginning. It's like that one stone that started the avalanche of going into the history of Middle-earth. Mm-hmm. And, Christopher Tolkien figuring out, can I do this? Does this work? Are people actually interested? And then it just becomes an instant bestseller. Yeah. And he goes like, okay, well, I think, we could sell this. So let's do it.
Let's do it.
And seeing the first glimpses deeper into the Legendarium is just absolutely breathtaking. So yes, on the reading suggestion, please do have a look at the Unfinished Tales. Yeah. It's absolutely amazing.
And of course, I'll be doing that with whomever I'm co-hosting with at the time in not next season, because next season is book 6 of The Lord of the Rings, but the following season is going to be my extra Legendarium tales. So we'll do things like stuff from the appendices, the Tale of Aragorn and Arwen. We'll do things that are like self-contained stories from the histories of Middle-earth. I want to touch on the Athrobeth for a number of weeks. Yeah. But then I'm definitely going to be covering things from Unfinished Tales, including the incredible tale of Aldarion and Erendis, which we've not even touched on in this show.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I mean, I see that as being like a 12-week, minimum discussion, and it's going to be so good.
That's not even a problem. Not
a problem at all. Cannot wait for that. That's going to be so much fun. Oh, this next reading, folks, we said that we were going to surprise you with a little bit of something outside of the Legendarium. This is that. It is also long. I really tried, folks. I clipped and cut and did everything I could to try to get this reading down. It is still probably going to be 15 minutes, maybe closer to 20. It is from Smith of Wootton Major. And I know that if the Lord of the Mark were here, this might be a passage that he would have chosen because that is his favorite non-Legendarium work.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm really looking forward to it. Take it away.
That was all that most people knew about him. It was enough indeed, and more than most men and women in the village achieved, even those who were skilled and hard-working. But there was more to know. For Smith became acquainted with Faerie, and some regions of it he knew as well as any mortal can, though since too many had become like Noakes, he spoke of this to few people, except his wife and his children. His wife was Nell, to whom he gave the silver coin, and his daughter was Nan, and his son was Ned Smithson. From them it could not have been kept secret anyway, for they sometimes saw the stars shining on his forehead when he came back from one of the long walks he would take alone now and then in the evening, or when he returned from a journey. From time to time he would go off, sometimes walking, sometimes riding, and it was generally supposed that it was on business, and sometimes it was, and sometimes it was not. At any rate, not to get orders for work, or to buy pig iron and charcoal and other supplies, though he attended to such things with care and knew how to turn an honest penny into twopence, as the saying went. But he had business of its own kind in Faerie, and he was welcome there, for the star shone bright on his brow, and he was as safe as a mortal can be in that perilous country. The lesser evils avoided the star, and from the greater evils he was guarded. For that he was grateful, for he soon became wise and understood that the marvels of Faerie cannot be approached without danger, and that many of the evils cannot be challenged without weapons of power too great for any mortal to wield. He remained a learner and explorer, not a warrior. And though in time he could have forged weapons that in his own world would have had power enough to become the matter of great tales and be worth a king's ransom, he knew that in Faerie they would have been of small account. So among all the things that he made, it is not remembered that he ever forged a sword or a spear or an arrowhead. In Faerie, at first he walked, for the most part, quietly among the lesser folk and the gentler creatures in the woods and meads of fair valleys, and by the bright waters in which at night strange stars shone, and at dawn the gleaming peaks of far mountains were mirrored. Some of his briefer visits he spent looking only at one tree or one flower, but later, in longer journeys, he had seen things of both beauty and terror that he could not clearly remember, nor report to his friends, though he knew that they dwelt deep in his heart. But some things he did not forget, and they remained in his mind as wonders and mysteries that he often recalled. When he first began to walk far without a guide, he thought he would discover the further bounds of the land, but great mountains rose before him, and going by long ways round about them, he came at last to a desolate shore. He stood beside the sea of windless storm, where the blue waves like snow-clad hills roll silently out of unlight to the long strand, bearing the white ships that return from battles on the dark marches of which men know nothing. He saw a great ship cast high upon the land, and the waters fell back in foam without a sound. The elven mariners were tall and terrible. Their swords shone and their spears glinted, and a piercing light was in their eyes. Suddenly, they lifted up their voices in a song of triumph, and his heart was shaken with fear, and he fell upon his face, and they passed over him and went away into the echoing hills. Afterwards he went no more to that strand, believing that he was in an island realm beleaguered by the sea, and he turned his mind towards the mountains, desiring to come to the heart of the kingdom. Once in these wanderings he was overtaken by a gray mist and strayed long at a loss, until the mist rolled away and he found that he was in a wide plain. Far off there was a great hill of shadow, and out of that shadow, which was its root, he saw the king's tree springing up, tower upon tower into the sky, and its light was like the sun at noon, and it bore at once leaves and flowers and fruits uncounted, and not one was the same as any other that grew on the tree. He never saw that tree again, though he often sought for it. On one such journey, climbing into the outer mountains, he came to a deep dale among them, and at its bottom lay a lake, calm and unruffled, though a breeze stirred the woods that surrounded it. In that dale the light was like a red sunset, but the light came up from the lake. From a low cliff that overhung it he looked down, and it seemed that he could see to an immeasurable depth. And there he beheld strange shapes of flame, bending and branching and wavering, like great weeds in a sea dingle, and fiery creatures went to and fro among them. Filled with wonder, he went down to the water's edge and tried it with his foot, but it was not water. It was harder than stone and sleeker than glass. He stepped on it, and he fell heavily, and a ringing boom ran across the lake and echoed in its shores. At once the breeze rose to a wild wind, roaring like a great beast, and it swept him up and hung him on the shore, and it drove him up the slopes, whirling and falling like a dead leaf. He put his arms about the stem of a young birch and clung to it, and the wind wrestled fiercely with them, trying to tear him away, but the birch was bent down to the ground by the blast and enclosed him in its branches. When at last the wind passed on, he rose and saw that the birch was naked. It was stripped of every leaf, and it wept, and tears fell from its branches like rain. He set his hand upon its white bark, saying, "Blessed be the birch! What can I do to make amends or give thanks?" He felt the answer of the tree pass up from his hand. "Nothing," it said. "Go away. The wind is hunting you. You do not belong here. Go away and never return." As he climbed back out of that dale, he felt the tears of the birch trickle down his face, and they were bitter on his lips. His heart was saddened as he went on his long road, and for some time he did not enter Faerie again, but he could not forsake it, and when he returned his desire was still stronger to go deep into the land. At last he found a road through the outer mountains, and he went on till he came to the inner mountains, and they were high and sheer and daunting. Yet in the end he found a pass that he could scale. And upon a day of days greatly daring, he came through a narrow cleft and looked down, though he did not know it, into the vale of Evermorn, where the green surpasses the green of the meads of Outer Fairy as they surpass ours in our springtime. There the air is so lucid that eyes can see the red tongues of birds as they sing on the trees upon the far side of the valley, though that is very wide, and the birds are no greater than wrens. On the inner side, the mountains went down in long slopes filled with the sound of bubbling waterfalls, and in great delight he hastened on. As he set foot upon the grass of the vale, he heard elven voices singing, and on a lawn beside a river, bright with lilies, he came upon many maidens dancing. The speed and the grace and the ever-changing modes of their movements enchanted him, and he stepped forward towards their ring. Then suddenly they stood still, and a young maiden with flowing hair and kilted skirt came out to meet him. She laughed as she spoke to him, saying, "You are becoming bold, Starbrow, are you not? Have you no fear what the queen might say if she knew of this, unless you have her leave?" He was abashed, for he became aware of his own thought and knew that she read it, that the star in his forehead was a passport to go wherever he wished, and now he knew that it was not. But she smiled as she spoke again. "Come, now that you are here, you shall dance with me." And she took his hand and led him into the ring. There they danced together, and for a while he knew what it was to have the swiftness and the power and the joy to accompany her. For a while. But soon as it seemed, they halted again, and she stooped and took up a white flower from before her feet, and she set it in his hair. "Farewell now," she said. "Maybe we shall meet again, by the Queen's leave." He remembered nothing of the journey home from that meeting, until he found himself riding along the roads in his own country, and in some villages people stared at him in wonder and watched him till he rode out of sight. When he came to his own house, his daughter ran out and greeted him with delight. He had returned sooner than was expected, but none too soon for those that awaited him. "Daddy," she cried, "where have you been? Your star is shining bright." When he crossed the threshold, the star dimmed again, but Nell took him by the hand and led him to the hearth, and there she turned and looked at him. "Dear man," she said, "where have you been and what have you seen? There is a flower in your hair." She lifted it gently from his head and lay it on her hand. It seemed like a thing seen from a great distance, yet there it was, and a light came from it that cast shadows on the walls of the room, now growing dark in the evening. The shadow of the man before her loomed up, and its great head was bowed over her. "You look like a giant, Dad," said his son, who had not spoken before. The flower did not wither nor grow dim, and they kept it as a secret and a treasure. The smith made a little casket with a key for it, and there it lay, and was handed down for many generations in his kin, and those who inherited the key would at times open the casket and look long at the living flower, till the casket closed again. The time of its shutting was not theirs to choose.
An absolutely magical reading for a really lovely and magical story.
It is such a story. You want to read the whole thing. Smith of Wootton Major is breathtaking. It really is. Oh.
And it's one of the things that I'm always trying to tell people, who come up and ask me, Marcel, what's so fascinating about Tolkien? And I always say, everyone knows Lord of the Rings, right? Everyone knows The Hobbit, right? And if you get a lucky day, people know about the Silmarillion. But it's the beautiful, the shorter stories, the fairy stories that he's telling in what shape or form that are so magical and so outwardly that I really love them so much.
Yeah. This is such an example of that. And the whole story is filled with moments like this. This is most of his journeys in fairy condensed into one big passage. But of course, there are more. He does eventually meet the queen, and I will not give you any spoilers on that.
Don't do.
No, of course not. Folks, you got to read that for yourself, or wait 3 seasons when we do a non-legendarium season and cover Smith of Wootton Major here on the PPP. But yeah, it is such a lovely story. It's so rich, so full of symbolism. It's not allegorical, I don't think, the way that Leaf by Niggle is. I know some do.
Some people would maybe see something in there, but I think it's when you come to the background of the stories, how they came to be, and in this case, it's one of those typical sort of Tolkien stories. He was writing a preface to one of the George MacDonald stories, who was a huge influence on him. Of course, it was for the fairy story, The Golden Key. And then, somehow instead of simply writing that preface that he was asked to do, it turned into a story of his own right, because he had a flashpoint of imagination, of inspiration, and he simply started to write. And that's where it took him. So thanks, George MacDonald, for writing the Golden Key. Otherwise, he wouldn't have Smith or Wooden Major. And it's an aside. It's an aside into a thought, into a word, into a linguistic nugget that he found, and then he just went nuts.
He really did.
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. And, I concluded far too simplistically that it's not allegory. What I meant to say is it's not as obviously allegory as Leaf by Niggle. It's not as clearly allegorical.
True. Yeah.
I do believe there are some very clear allegorical elements in it. I don't know if the story itself as a whole is a full allegory the way Leaf is, but it is fantastic. It is the kind of thing that makes you think. And yet at the same time, you don't have to. If you just want to enjoy it as a story, you can. It's lovely. It's truly lovely.
And that's one of the things that I so much appreciate about Tolkien Reading Day, and the opportunity of actually reading out a story. That's what I tell a lot of people who what's so beautiful about the stories. And I say, read them out. Don't just read them out, because it really, Smith and other of his smaller stories, they are alliterative verse. They are really, there's so much beauty and rhythm.
There's
and
musicality harmony in the very words. Yes.
And so reading them out, you are transported much easier, much more magically into that otherworldly place. So reading out is the thing to go with Tolkien, definitely.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. I mean, we talk about that all the time on the show. It's, especially when we get to some of these passages, there are times where, even though I've read the Lord of the Rings dozens of times in my life, right? That studying it and preparing for these episodes, I still don't catch it. But then reading the passage aloud, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. There's some alliteration I hadn't caught before, or there's this rhythm that I hadn't caught before. And it's only in reading it aloud that you get that full experience. And so, I cannot recommend enough reading it out loud as often as you can.
I'm not a dad. I mean, obviously, this is like a podcast by dads. So shout out to every dad and every mother out there. If you read out the stories, that's the way to go, because that's how Tolkien effectively started with The Hobbit. He read out stuff, and that's what the kids loved, and they were very critical of what he was telling them. So
that is true.
He had to be good about it, right?
He needed a continuity director, and Christopher was constantly like, "Wait a minute! The last time you mentioned him, he had a silver tassel or something, right?"
Yeah. And that door was blue, green, or what? Come on, Dad. Come on. You should really put in some work here.
Oh man, that is good stuff. Oh, I cannot believe we're coming up on, each of us have one more reading to go, and they're both longer readings, sort of like the Smith reading. You've got The Final Journey of the Three, and this comes from Of the Rings of Power in the Third Age and the Silmarillion. Marcel, take this away.
Even as the first shadows were felt in Mirkwood, there appeared in the west of Middle-earth the Istari, whom men called the Wizards. None knew at the time whence they were, save Círdan of the Havens, and only to Elrond and to Galadriel did he reveal that they came over the sea. But afterwards it was said among the elves that there were messengers sent by the lords of the west to contest the power of Sauron, if he should arise again, and to move elves and men and all living things of good will to valiant deeds. In the likeness of men they appeared old, but vigorous, and they changed little with the years, and aged but slowly. Though great cares lay on them, great wisdom they had, and many powers of mind and hand. Long they journeyed far and wide among elves and men, and held converse also with beasts and with birds, and the peoples of Middle-earth gave to them many names, for their true names they did not reveal. Chief among them were those whom the elves called Mithrandir and Curonir, but men in the north named Gandalf and Saruman. Of these Curonir was the eldest and came first, and after him came Mithrandir and Radagast, and others of the Istari who went into the east of Middle-earth and do not come into these tales. Radagast was the friend of all beasts and birds, but Coronir went most among men, and he was subtle in speech and skilled in all the devices of smithcraft. Mithrandir was closest in council with Elrond and the elves. He wandered far in the north and west, and made never in any land any lasting abode. But Coronir journeyed into the east, and when he returned, he dwelt at Orthanc in the ring of Isengard, which the Nomorians made in the days of their power. Ever most vigilant was Mithrandir, and he it was that most doubted the darkness and Mirkwood, for though many deemed that it was wrought by the ring race, he feared that it was indeed the first shadow of Sauron returning, and he went to Dol Goldur, and the sorcerer fled from him, and there was a watchful peace for a long while. But at length the shadow returned, and its power increased, and in that time was first made the Council of the Wise, that is called the White Council, and therein were Elrond and Galadriel and Círdan, and other lords of the Eldar, and with them were Mithrandir and Coronir. And Coronir, there was Saruman the White, was chosen to be their chief, for he had most studied the devices of Sauron of old. Galadriel indeed had wished that Mithrandir should be the head of the council, and Saruman begrudged them that, for his pride and desire of mastery was grown great. But Mithrandir refused the office, since he would have no ties, and no allegiance, save to those who sent him, and he would abide in no place, nor be subject to any summons. But Saruman now began to study the law of the rings of power, their making and their history. Now the shadow grew ever greater, and the hearts of Elrond and Mithrandir darkened. Therefore, on a time Mithrandir at great peril went again to Dol Guldur and the pits of the sorcerer, and he discovered the truth of his fears and escaped. And returning to Elrond, he said, "True, alas is our guess. This is not one of the Olyri as many have long supposed. It is Sauron himself, who has taken shape again and now grows apace. And he is gathering again all the rings to his hand, and he seeks ever for news of the one, of the heirs of Isildur, if they still live on earth." And Elrond answered, "In the hour that Isildur took the ring and would not surrender it, this doom was wrought, that Sauron should return." "Yet the one was lost," said Mithrandir, "and while it still lies hid, we can master the enemy if we gather our strength, and tarry not too long." Then the White Council was summoned, and Mithrandir urged them to swift deeds, but Coronir spoke against him, and counselled them to wait yet and to watch. "For I believe not," said he, "that the one will ever be found again in Middle-earth. Into Anduin it fell, and long ago, I deem, it was rolled to the sea. There it shall lie until the end, when all this world is broken and the deeps are removed." Therefore naught was done at the time, though Elrond's heart misgave him, and he said to Mithrandir, "Nonetheless, I forebode that the one will yet be found, and then war will rise again, and in that war this age will be ended. Indeed, in a second darkness it will end, unless some strange chance deliver us that my eyes cannot see." "Many are the strange changes of the world," said Mithrandir, "and help oft shall come from the hands of the weak, when the wise falter." And now I'm going to skip a few things. Well, actually, basically The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings.
Pretty much.
All of it.
Yeah, all of it, right?
Yeah, and then we come to this. Now all these things were achieved, for the most part, by the counsel and vigilance of Mithrandir, and the last few days he was revealed as a lord of great reverence, and clad in white he rode into battle. But not until the time came for him to depart was it known that he had long guarded the red ring of fire. At the first, that ring had been entrusted to Círdan, lord of the Havens, but he had surrendered it to Mithrandir, for he knew whence he came, and whither at last he would return. "Take now this ring," he said, "for thy labours and thy cares will be heavy, but in all it will support thee, defend thee from weariness. For this is the ring of fire, and wherewith may be thou shalt rekindle hearts to the valour of old in a world that grows chill. But as for me, my heart is with the sea, and I will dwell by the grey shores guarding the havens until the last ship sails. Then I shall await thee." White was that ship, and long was it a building, and long it awaited the end of which Círdan had spoken. But when all these things were done, and the heir of Isildur had taken up the lordship of men, and the dominion of the West had passed to him, then it was made plain that the power of the three rings also was ended, and to the firstborn the world grew old and grey. In that time, the last of the Noldor set sail from the havens and left Middle-earth forever. And latest of all, the keepers of the three rings rode to the sea, and Master Elrond took there the ship that Círdan had made ready. At the twilight of autumn it sailed out of Mithlond, until the seas of the bent world fell away beneath it, and the winds of the round sky troubled it no more. And borne upon the high airs above the mists of the world, it passed into the ancient West, and an end was come for the elder of story and song.
Oh, wow. I remember getting to that moment in season 1 and just the tears were flowing. I mean, it's the end of the Eldar. It's the end of the people of the stars. They're gone. And of course, so are also the Istari as Gandalf goes with them. Yeah.
And what a story that is. I mean, seriously, what did the Eldar achieve? What did they go through?
Yeah.
What did they provide for everyone else in the world? It's just, and seriously, some people come up to me and say, Tolkien, I think he's not quite the author that I would expected him to be. His style is a bit, I don't quite like his style. And I'm like, did you just listen to what I read out to you,
Seriously.
man? Listen.
Yeah. Just listen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just fantastic stuff again. It was an interesting choice. I have to admit, when you first named this passage as the one you would read, I thought, oh, okay. I get the last part, the journey, the travel. But the entire thing is, it's basically the closing of the first reading that you did. It's the end of the Eldar, whereas before it was the beginning of the Eldar. It was their first journey, and here's the last journey of the last of them. And all that they accomplished in the interim, and here specifically what they were able to accomplish, in the Third Age with the eventually discovery of the One, and then, shepherding the One to its eventual destruction. Yeah. And I love the way Tolkien sums that up. Just now, all these things were achieved for the most part by the Council of Divisions of Mithrandir.
Yeah.
All these things being stuff that fills, volumes of books. Yeah.
Absolutely. And what I love about this is, I mean, they are called wizards, the Istari, but I would always love to call them the wise wanderers, because they scour the world. They go everywhere. Mm-hmm. They talk to people who might support them and their cause. Mm-hmm. They find out the people who obviously are not interested in that. Sauron's friends and family. So, and that's also pretty clear. So, but they realize that to understand people, you have to visit them. For to understanding a world, you have to walk it, to see it. And back in the day, they didn't have public transport or planes, so it's good old walking or riding. And I don't want to know how many miles and leagues Aragorn or Gandalf covered in that time. So
I want to see their Fitbit stats. How many steps? How many?
This has to be an error in my computing. This is an error in my computing. You cannot have walked 3,000 miles.
This many digits. It is physically impossible for one person to walk this far.
Yeah, gonna walk 500 miles. Yeah. Well, that's kidding. I did that. That's called Tuesday to me. Yeah, true.
Tuesday, exactly. Ken was like, that's an easy day. Fantastic reading. And I love Círdan's dialogue there, right? Thy labors and thy cares will be heavy, but in all this ring will support thee and defend thee from weariness. It also, the way he speaks with thee and thy, it reminds me of the thing that we dove into on the podcast back in the passage of the Grey Company. For a long time, I just see this as being formal, right? It's just a very but it's more than that, because the thee and thou are the informal. The English, we don't really use those anymore. We just use you. You, of course, you speak German and you understand the whole fact that there are two different yous, right? There's the formal you and there's the informal you, intimate you, if you will. And this is very much the intimate you. Thee and thy is, thou are all the intimate ones, the closeness. And Círdan is really demonstrating his friendship and proximity and closeness to Gandalf when he uses thee and thy instead of you and yours. And it just goes back to that moment. And you weren't with me on this. This is when I was working with Don Marshall, obscure Lord of the Rings facts guy on TikTok. We were talking about this thee and thou thing because Aragorn kept saying you and yours to Éowyn, and Éowyn was thee and thy. And
wink, wink,
it was
nudge, nudge.
so awkward. I felt so bad. She was clearly confessing her love for Aragorn just in her choice of second person pronouns. It was beautiful. And it was one of those things that if you don't know it, you don't catch it. And it's just another example of Tolkien's masterful use of language. But I loved that here in this passage because it's not just archaic language. It's language of closeness, language of brotherhood, and of support and encouragement here. Yeah.
I think that one of the reasons why I chose this particular part is I think my favorite elf, I mean, my nickname in the German-speaking countries as Tolkien fan is Olwe. I'm the Lord of the Teleri. So I'm like a huge fan of Olwe, and I've always been. But that's just because one of my best buddies, he's one of the guys who did the then largest film website, Lord of the Rings .de in Germany.
Oh, okay.
He had the nickname Kurdan. And we met like 30 years ago and at one of the conventions, and he said, "Hey, Marcel, it's you, right? My nickname is Kurdan." And I said, "Bummer, you took my nickname," because I wanted to be Kurdan, and because of that, I had to take another sea elf.
Take Olwe instead.
So I had to take Olwe instead. And Kurdan he's the best. I have a piece in I'm on Hand of the Tolkien Society about the coolest elf you'd never read about.
Yeah, and it is Círdan. You're right.
He's
so cool that he even has a beard, and that is just like that. It makes him the ultimate cool elf. Yeah,
absolutely, definitely.
Yeah, still my favorite is Finrod. I'm sorry, nobody's ever going to take Finrod off of my pedestal, but Círdan's pretty close. He's a pretty amazing guy.
I'm also a Gondolin fanboy. So if you say about Tumladen and the Seven Gates and coming into the valley, I'm all up, and that's the best thing ever. So
yep, absolutely. All right. Well, we are approaching the last reading now for Tolkien Reading Day. I should just go ahead and warn you now that this is a rather emotional reading. This is actually the Fellowship's final journey, and it comes to us from The Lord of the Rings, Book 6, Chapter 9, The Grey Havens. On September the 21st, they set out together, Frodo on the pony that had borne him all the way from Minas Tirith and was now called Strider, and Sam on his beloved Bill. It was a fair golden morning, and Sam did not ask where they were going. He thought he could guess. They took the stock road over the hills and went towards the woody end, and they let their ponies walk at their leisure. They camped in the green hills, and on September the 22nd, they rode gently down into the beginning of the trees as afternoon was wearing away. "If that isn't the very tree you hid behind when the Black Rider first showed up, Mr. Frodo," said Sam, pointing to the left. "It seems like a dream now." It was evening, and the stars were glimmering in the eastern sky as they passed the ruined oak and turned and went on down the hill between the hazel thickets. Sam was silent, deep in his memories. Presently he became aware that Frodo was singing softly to himself, singing the old walking song, but the words were not quite the same. "Still round the corner there may wait a new road or a secret gate, and though I oft have passed them by, a day will come at last when I shall take the hidden paths that run west of the moon, east of the sun." And as if in answer from down below, coming up the road out of the valley, voices sang, and you'll forgive me if I don't sing this because I don't really have a tune to it. "Ah, Elbereth Gilthoniel, Silivren Penna Miriel, O Menel Aglar Elenath, Gilthoniel a Elbereth. We still remember, we who dwell in this far land beneath the trees, the starlight on the western seas." Frodo and Sam halted and sat silent in the soft shadows until they saw a shimmer as the travelers came towards them. There was Gildor and many fair elven folk, and there, to Sam's wonder, rode Elrond and Galadriel. Elrond wore a mantle of gray and had a star upon his forehead, and a silver harp was in his hand, and upon his finger was a ring of gold with a great blue stone, Vilja, mightiest of the three. But Galadriel sat upon a white palfrey and was robed all in glimmering white, like clouds about the moon, for she herself seemed to shine with a soft light. On her finger was Nenya, the ring wrought of mithril, that bore a single white stone flickering like a frosty star. Riding slowly behind on a small gray pony and seeming to nod in his sleep was Bilbo himself. Elrond greeted them gravely and graciously, and Galadriel smiled upon them. "Well, Master Samwise," she said, "I hear and see that you have used my gift well. The Shire shall now be more than ever blessed and beloved." Sam bowed, but found nothing to say. He had forgotten how beautiful the lady was. Then Bilbo woke up and opened his eyes. "Hello, Frodo," he said. "Well, I have passed the old Duke today, so that's settled. And now I think I am quite ready to go on another journey. Are you coming?" "Yes, I am coming," said Frodo. "The ring-bearers should go together." "Where are you going, Master?" cried Sam, though at last he understood what was happening. "To the Havens, Sam," said Frodo. "And I can't come?" "No, Sam. Not yet, anyway. Not further than the Havens, though you too were a ring-bearer, if only for a little while. Your time may come. Do not be too sad, Sam. You cannot be always torn in two. You will have to be one and whole for many years. You have so much to enjoy and to be and to do." "But," said Sam, and tears started in his eyes, "I thought you were going to enjoy the Shire too, for years and years after all you have done." "So I thought too, once. But I have been too deeply hurt, Sam. I tried to save the Shire, and it has been saved, but not for me. It must often be so, Sam, when things are in danger. Someone has to give them up, lose them, so that others may keep them. But you are my heir. All that I had and might have had I leave to you. And also you have Rose, and Eleanor, and Frodo lad will come, and Rosie lass, and Merry, and Goldilocks, and Pippin, and perhaps more that I cannot see. Your hands and your wits will be needed everywhere. You will be the mayor, of course, as long as you want to be, and the most famous gardener in history. And you will read things out of the Red Book and keep alive the memory of the age that is gone, so that people will remember the great danger, and so love their beloved land all the more. And that will keep you as busy and as happy as anyone can be, as long as your part of the story goes on. Come now, ride with me." Then Elrond and Galadriel rode on, for the Third Age was over, and the days of the rings were past, and an end was come of the story and song of those times. With them went many elves of the high kindred who would no longer stay in Middle-earth, and among them, filled with a sadness that was yet blessed and without bitterness, rode Sam and Frodo and Bilbo, and the elves delighted to honor them. Though they rode through the midst of the Shire all the evening and all the night, none saw them pass, save the wild creatures, or here and there some wanderer in the dark who saw a swift shimmer under the trees, or a light and shadow flowing through the grass as the moon went westward. And when they had passed from the Shire, going about the south skirts of the White Downs, they came to the Far Downs, and to the towers, and looked on the distant sea, and so they rode down at last to Mithlond, to the grey havens in the long firth of Lune. As they came to the gates, Círdan the shipwright came forth to greet them. Very tall he was, and his beard was long, and he was grey and old, save that his eyes were keen as stars. And he looked at them and bowed and said, "All is now ready." Then Círdan led them to the havens, and there was a white ship lying, and upon the quay, beside a great grey horse, stood a figure robed all in white, awaiting them. As he turned and came towards them, Frodo saw that Gandalf now wore openly on his hand the third ring, Narya the Great, and the stone upon it was red as fire. Then those who were to go were glad, for they knew that Gandalf also would take ship with them. But Sam was now sorrowful at heart, and it seemed to him that if the parting would be bitter, more grievous still would be the long road home alone. But even as they stood there, and the elves were going aboard, and all was being made ready to depart, up rode Merry and Pippin in great haste. And amid his tears, Pippin laughed. "You tried to give us the slip once before and failed, Frodo," he said. "This time you have nearly succeeded, but you have failed again. It was not Sam, though, that gave you away this time, but Gandalf himself." "Yes," said Gandalf, "for it will be better to ride back 3 together than 1 alone. Well, here at last, dear friends, on the shores of the sea, comes the end of our fellowship in Middle-earth. Go in peace. I will not say, do not weep, for not all tears are an evil." Then Frodo kissed Merry and Pippin, and last of all Sam, and went aboard. And the sails were drawn up, and the wind blew, and slowly the ship slipped away down the long grey firth. And the light of the glass of Galadriel that Frodo bore glimmered and was lost. And the ship went out into the high sea and passed on into the west, until at last, on a night of rain, Frodo smelled a sweet fragrance on the air, and heard the sound of singing that came over the water. And then it seemed to him that as in his dream in the house of Bombadil, the grey rain curtain turned all to silver glass and was rolled back, and he beheld white shores, and beyond them a far green country under a swift sunrise. But to Sam the evening deepened to darkness as he stood at the haven, and as he looked at the grey sea, he saw only a shadow on the waters that was soon lost in the west. There still he stood far into the night, hearing only the sigh and murmur of the waves on the shores of Middle-earth, and the sound of them sank deep into his heart. Beside him stood Merry and Pippin, and they were silent. At last the 3 companions turned away, and never again looking back, they rode slowly homewards, and they spoke no word to one another until they came back to the Shire, but each had great comfort in his friends on the long grey road. At last they rode over the downs and took the east road, and then Merry and Pippin rode on to Buckland, and already they were singing again as they went. But Sam turned to Bywater, and so came back up the hill as day was ending once more. And he went on, and there was yellow light and fire within, and the evening meal was ready, and he was expected. And Rose drew him in, and set him in his chair, and put little Eleanor upon his lap. He drew a deep breath. "Well, I'm back," he said.
Thank you, Alan, for choosing this particular piece, travel and adventure.
It is the ultimate adventure for Frodo, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And yet every one of these people has a different adventure. Sam comes back and has to be the mayor of the Shire and raise his gigantic family.
Making fun of Feanor, who only had 7 kids with Naردonel, but he's
13.
He and Rosie are, they are fairly, might have been productive.
They're productive. Very productive.
Absolutely, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't mind telling you that I had to stop and take several breaks because I was crying at a few spots.
And I had to egg him on because we have to finish this episode at one point in time. But it's one of the best. I mean, it's one of those paragraphs where I'm so glad that you took it, Alan, because I would have fallen apart really, because it's beautiful. It is just beautiful.
It is so rich and so emotional and so poignant. And after so long, the fellowship is finally coming to an end. And, Gandalf announcing that, right? Making it official is sort of one of those things that hurts. It's a deeply bittersweet moment as Gandalf says, the fellowship is over, right? We've come to an end here on the shores of Middle-earth, and yet he allows room for sorrow, for that sadness to come, that natural sadness from parting. It's really a neat moment.
If you ever wanted to go for the top 10 most loved, most appreciated, most respected Tolkien quotes.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I will not say "do not weep, for not all tears are an evil." That's one of the top 3. I mean,
it absolutely is.
And I love what I love about this so much, and it's been gaining so much respect and appreciation in recent years, is that people cry, people kiss and hug, and realize that pain and loss and sorrow are part of life, but
Yes.
there are also friends and there's family, and if you're lucky and if you have a bit of, a few things that are really good in your life, you can get back to them and they will support you and you will get through this. So,
Yeah.
and some people may know I've been suffering from depression for quite a few years now, and reading The Lord of the Rings is really one of those things that, keeps me up and motivates me. And because reading those lines, like I'm back, it really, really helps,
That is really neat to hear. First of all, thank you for being so vulnerable like that and letting our listeners know that, because you're not alone, and you know that there are so many others who struggle with their own challenges. And I know that I've had the good fortune of hearing from so many people who've talked about the impact that Tolkien's works have had on them, and how even sometimes our show has helped them see things in Tolkien's works and has brought them some comfort and encouragement. So yeah, there's something about the way Tolkien writes that can reach deep into our hearts like that and really help, at times of challenge and times of sorrow.
If you really want the ultimate hashtag, it's "Well, I'm back."
Isn't it?
It really works on so many occasions, so many situations. In reconnecting with friends, talking to family, coming back to your job, or finding any opportunity to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So you're
100% right. I mean, it's so appropriate in so many places. It's also so very Anglo-Saxon, but we'll talk about that when we get to the
a little bit
to the end of the book next season. Tom Shippey has a lot to say about "Well, I'm back," and I'm very much looking forward to bringing his words in on that.
As far as I know, Tom, he does have quite a few things to say on a very prolonged time scale. And it's interesting. All of it is so amazing. Very much, absolutely. It's very
Sam
much.
has something, it's a very, yes, well, and I'm sure we'll bring that up on the podcast next season, yes.
Did you notice that road name has actually a connection with XYZ examples, blah, blah, blah. It's like, Tom, listen, can I buy you a pint?
I love Tom.
Yeah,
I do hope he never actually hears me do the impressions of him, because I'm afraid that he will lose a little bit of respect for me.
Don't worry about it. If you pay him a pint, if you buy him a pint,
go, which I would always be happy to do.
Yeah,
always be happy. There were so many passages to choose from on Travel and Adventure. There were a number. Yeah, you'd chosen all of yours basically from the first age, except for the little bit there of the Rings of Power, but it was still from the Silmarillion.
Yes.
I was trying to find, and there are so many that I wanted to bring in.
Travel and Adventure in Tolkien. It's like it's book
everywhere.
Sorry.
My first thought was, I'm going to do Aragorn's Tales of Errantry, right, as Thorondor.
Yeah.
And how cool that would have been. And then I thought, I don't know, maybe I'll do Eärendil's travel. I mean, come on.
Shut up.
Dude, don't get much more cool than Eärendil's trip to Valinor. And then I remembered this. And I thought, I've got to do this. And then there's also the practical side of me that's like, if I can do this now and get the tears out of the way, then when I have to do this next year on the podcast, it won't be so hard. And that's just lying to myself.
I am very much going to listen to that future episode and getting back to this one. Thank you.
Yeah, because it's still going to kill me just as much next year, because it'll represent the end of 6 years of going through the Lord of the Rings on the show.
There's so much time. So many things have happened. So many friendships. So many connections. It's just that is what to me is the essence of Tolkien fandom, is community, is the fellowship.
Exactly.
And that is just absolutely precious. Yeah. With 3 S's at the end of it.
Precious.
Yeah.
Precious.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I remember, we read these words and we're thinking of the story, but there are these so many layers in Tolkien fandom and in our experiences in the Tolkien fandom. I remember, for example, this scene in the Jackson films, almost 20 years ago, and tears were coming to my eyes then, not just because I'm thinking of Sam and Frodo and all of that, but because I'm thinking of the experience of going and seeing these films in the theaters with my friends, with our fellow Tolkien fans, because I was seeing every one of them on opening night,
obviously,
and that sort of experience. Well, now that's over. You can never see it for the first time again, just like you can never read The Lord of the Rings for the first time again. And now it's a different thing, and you sort of mourn that loss. And, it's going to be the same thing next season at the end of season 8 of the Prancing Pony podcast. But
has it been 8 years?
Like, it will have been then. It's the 7th season now.
Yeah.
7 years, just 7 years ago last week as we're recording this. So last month as it comes out.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was fantastic. Any observations about travel and adventure as we start to wrap up?
Well, the thing is, I think right at the beginning of this episode, we talk about that travel and adventure in Middle Earth isn't about vacation. I mean, this is not like I'm not going to go to the parlor and have a massage and go to the spa and stuff. That's. I mean, I'd love to see that somewhere in Minas Tirith, that there's like a huge...
Yeah, the second circle of Minas Tirith.
It's the spa circle. That's what they call it, the SPAC. Everyone knows what's going on there. People are enjoying themselves, having decent food. Look out on, the Ramas Echo. It's like a beautiful sight. And you can see Minos Morgul in the distance. That's a B&B for, that you have to see. But no, it's really that the travel and adventure that we go through always has as a goal or as either it's a goal, or what to me is more important is it's a journey that people go on a journey and they don't really know what is going to happen during that particular journey. They have hopes, they have expectations, they have fears of what might happen. But at the end of the day, you might get lucky. Yeah. And that's like, if there is like a metaphor for human life, that's kind of it.
You might get lucky.
It's like, well, it's a journey. It's not the end. It's not like the finish of it. It's what you take with you, the friends that you make, the jobs that you get, that the people that you meet, and all the experiences
that you have. Yeah,
absolutely
right. Yeah. I mean, you talk about that, and my first thought is to go back to Bilbo and the Hobbit. I mean, they have a goal, they have an objective, and it's to go and get the gold back from the dragon, go and get the treasure back, and claim Erebor. And yet the story is, of course, really about the journey that Bilbo himself makes, internally, and this sort of Tuke Baggins battle and all the friendships that he makes with the dwarves. It isn't just about the gold. Yeah.
Yeah. You're not quite the Hobbit that you used to be, in the sense, when Gandalf
coming all the way back. You're right. Bringing it full circle.
Something very odd about you, Mr. Baggins.
That's right.
And that's true. I mean, to me, always that the best thing is if you either you meet people who are really amazing and wonderful, and you make friends, or you learn something that it's not about this whole self improvement thing that 21st century is offering you, but that you as a human being, as a friend, as a father, mother, son, whatever, become a better person for yourself and to yourself, so that the next day is maybe a better day than the last one.
Absolutely. Well, one thing about travel that's really interesting, it's worth mentioning that despite writing like a very experienced traveler, Tolkien himself really wasn't one, was he?
He wasn't.
No, he was very much a homebody.
Yeah, the thing is, I once visited France. Yeah, during the First World War as a soldier at the Somme. Like, that's not traveling, man. That's... Sorry, we shouldn't make light of this. It was really serious.
No, of course not.
But it's hilarious because the times that he went to France, he was really unlucky. Yeah. Either it was the war, or on another occasion he helped a family, as a guide, and then someone died on that journey. So it's like, what the hell? And I think that these experiences of, to some people, traveling is opening up experiences and your perspective on life. But Tolkien, as a young boy, as a kid, was he traveled around, he moved a lot, and I think that there's this sort of like the contrast between
that's true
stability and a home lets you go elsewhere. If you know that you have a home to go to, then you will go journeying and you will see the world and you go to all the different places that there are. But if you do not have a home in yourself, then you will be hesitant to actually leave that. So no, Tolkien didn't journey that much. Not at all.
No, he did not.
Maybe Wales, a lot of Ireland, when he did extracurricular.
You've got there's a letter where he talked about that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like it's 165. I have never tried to mimic Tolkien.
Are you going to try to mimic Tolkien?
Welcome to the Tolkien Reading Day 2023. Thanks to the Prancing Pony podcast, I am doing this. I am very untraveled, though I know Wales and have often been in Scotland, never north of the Tay, and know something of France, Belgium, and Ireland. I have spent a good deal of time in Ireland.
Indeed. And, he would once again mention Ireland in a mostly good light in letter 213. And he says the same thing. I do not travel much. I love Wales, what is left of it, when mines and the even more ghastly seaside resorts have done their worst.
Yeah.
And especially the Welsh language. But I have not, in fact, been in Wales for a long time, except for crossing it on the way to Ireland. I go frequently to Ireland, and then he puts in parentheses, Éire, Southern Ireland, being fond of it and of most of its people. But the Irish language I find wholly unattractive.
Yeah, well, the thing is that's one of the points that is so lovingly taken up on social media. It's not that he dislikes all Irish or the language. Oh, no. It just happens to him that it's saying like...
It's aesthetically unpleasing.
It's like, I don't like steak. That doesn't make you a bull hater, right? It doesn't make you a cow hater, right? It just means you don't like steak.
You don't like steak, and that's okay.
And that's very, very okay. No, I really love that, because one of the things that a lot of people come to, the first 100 pages in Lord of the Rings is just landscape, and it's traveling, and they walk, and blah, blah.
And it's amazing.
And it's amazing, and it's the anthropomorphization of landscape, the danger in the land. And it's all there, and it's happening so much. And he's so good at describing landscapes and just traveling. It's absolutely amazing for someone who didn't travel that much.
Exactly right. Now, of course, he traveled a little bit more than what he mentioned in those two letters. You talked about obviously his time in France in the war, but also, that journey where somebody was tragically killed. But we also know that when he was a young man, he took that long summer trip to the Alps, including Lauterbrunnen. That was all the way back in 1911. So he had traveled, but he never made it to the States, for instance.
No, he never made it. But as a true born Colonian, from Germany, I'm very proud of that. I know, and research has been done on this, that Tolkien also did a Rhine Valley tour, past the beautiful castles and stuff. So he definitely had to come by Cologne because there was a train station, and it's the biggest train station in Germany, around here.
Okay.
So
you're going to put up a blue plaque and say Tolkien was here?
I'm so going to do that.
No, you're not.
I know. But I am tempted, slightly tempted.
Of course, I'm sure you are.
Yeah.
Well, folks, there's no time for the mailbag tonight, as you might imagine, typically the case for Tolkien Reading Day episodes. That does wrap it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. But be sure to join us again next week when Marcel and I get back to the text in the Ride of the Rohirrim.
I'm so looking forward to this.
I bet.
It's like Rohirrim. It's like, so there's so many R's in there. It's just going to roll off the tongue.
Roll off the
tongue. Well, Ellen and I want to thank the members of the team of the Prancing Pony Podcast, editor Jordan Ronells, Borleman Becca Davis, social media manager Casey Hilsey, event and Patreon community coordinator Katie McKenna, graphic artist Megan Collins, and website guru Phil D.
Now, speaking of the website, please be sure to give us a visit there at theprancingponypodcast.com. We've got show notes, hilarious outtakes, Prancing Pony ponderings, and our online storefront where you can get all sorts of PPP merch, including some really cool new chapter art for Megan.
You'll also want to visit our library page. The Prancing Pony Podcast is first and foremost a podcast about the books. So if you're interested in a book we've mentioned on the show, you'll find a link for it in our library. The PPP gets a small amount of compensation when you make a purchase, and we thank you for that.
Indeed, we do. And we also want to thank our patrons at the Kierdan's contribution tier. We start with DeMay in Alaska, James in Virginia, Tamsin in Minnesota, Chad in Texas, Lance in New Jersey, Paul in Colorado, Jerry in Texas, Joseph in Texas, Kathy from North Carolina, Lori from Washington, Carlos in California, Brian in the UK, Ned from Connecticut, Jerry from Washington, Joe in Washington, and Erwin from the Netherlands.
There's also Dylan in Australia, Ben in Minnesota, Anthony in Texas, Karen in the UK, Zaksu in Illinois, Brian in Texas, Sarah in New Jersey, June in Ireland, Joshua in Massachusetts, Lucy in Texas, Connor in North Carolina, Keith in Alabama, Carson in Oklahoma, Vivian in California, James in Massachusetts, and Anne in Kentucky. Thank you all so very much for your support.
Indeed. Thank you very, very much.
And make sure you don't miss any episodes of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Subscribe now through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or your favorite podcast app.
And one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your thoughts, comments, and most of all, the passages on travel and adventure that you will be reading on Tolkien Reading Day to Barleman at theprancingponypodcast.com. And if you want your voice literally heard, well, just send us audio of your question. Visit podinbox.com/prancingponypod and record your question for us.
Please be sure to still email the question to Barliman. Even though Barliman's been a lot more reliable lately, there's still a lot of mail to sort through. We'll try to get to you just as soon as we're able.
As always, though, this has been far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time,
Raise a glass, have a cuppa, and enjoy reading Tolkien. Goodbye.